Hey Christ Church staff. Hey, I wanted to share a few thoughts with you via video since our time here last week got cut off before we could talk about values. So I told Shannon, hey, I'll just do a little quick video here in my office. This is actually a finished off garage attic on a detached garage, and this is my home office. So it's great to be with you guys here from home in Houston. Behind me I have a little kind of vision frame final summary, and you can see here we've got our mission that we talked about and the values that we didn't get to talk about. So I wanted to share really just a few nuggets there with you about the Joel team and how they came up with these. And then I wanted to give you, and there'll be some stuff emailed to you from Shannon that will be some processing things for you guys to do as a team. Now I want to remind you here, this side of the frame, we talked about mission, becoming living proof of God's love, one person at a time. That's our compass, that's our rally cry, that's our ever-present centerpiece for conversation, helping remind people ultimately what we're supposed to be doing. Now what we did on the Joel team is we looked at about 5 or 6 different data inputs, if you will, for values. We did a values survey. Actually involved the one that you guys were involved in as a staff early in the process. We looked at the previously stated values. We looked at the Fruitful Congregations book and the fact that many leaders in the church have been introduced to some of those concepts you'll see reflected here. We had a lot of, we talked about the kingdom concept and pulled threads through that. We also, as an outsider, as your navigator, I spoke to the team and said, here are some things I see from the outside that I think are prominent with you guys. And at the end of the day, we put all these things on the board, and then we had probably a good hour and a half of discussion of what's missing, what else, and sharing stories about Christ Church's history and so forth. Then we had a whole second meeting after that where we circled around some of the key ideas, and really we did a vote, came up with some top ideas, and began to massage how we would articulate those ideas. And then a subgroup got together and basically did a final articulation here. Now what we decided on for a kind of a handlebars, or the way we label these values, is a short phrase rather than a 1 or 2 word articulation. And the short phrase has a really cool thing built inside of it, because we talked about how there's a kind of an expected idea that we have talked about before as a church, and we thought, hey, let's start with that as a starting point and push it a little bit more. Talk about the aspirational aspect of that piece, and that'll make more sense here as we walk through this articulation. Let's start with the first value. We talked about passionate worship and how that's the most evident thing about the church. People come and see, and there's a centerpiece every Sunday of the importance of how we worship. And we talked about that igniting spiritual transformation. That's more of that aspirational piece. But we said, what if we articulate this value of passionate worship that ignites spiritual transformation? So that's that kind of 1-2 punch, if you will, with the way we've done that. In my mind, one of the devices that I'm doing is I'm almost seeing the value as this spiritual transformation is what drives us. And as you recall, our definition of values are the shared convictions that guide our actions and reveal our strengths as a church. The shared convictions that guide our actions and reveal our strengths as a church. So I think of that first one as spiritual transformation. The second one, we've talked about radical hospitality. That language has been around, and it's been something that came to the top of our conversations as a team. But we also talked about how that inspires something even deeper or bigger, and that's a sense of genuine acceptance. I love the way the Methodist heritage champions a more accepting posture generally, as in all the family of different kingdom expressions there. So that was our second value. Radical hospitality inspires genuine acceptance. Well, the third one is faith development, and what we wanted to acknowledge is that it's easy to sit around and do Bible studies all day long that don't really push you outside the door to make a difference with your life. And so we talked about faith development that fuels love in action. And so that love in action is the third push there, third driving value. And then finally we talked about risk-taking mission that creates social impact. And the idea of social impact, the idea of having not just a better church, but having a better community. The idea, the question of if your church was, if Christ Church was somehow uprooted from the community, would the community even know that there was that it was gone, right? So that all kinds of ways to do mission, but does the mission actually create a change in the community that you're living? And one of the features that the Joel team is bringing here for you all to interact with is the idea of only having 4. I highly encourage that. I think it's a great decision because 4 is really easy to remember. And as you can imagine, these are really, really, really big ideas. You could spend a lifetime asking the question, how do we drill deeper into this? How do these affect and change and shape our mindset, our attitude, our actions as a church together? A few things to reflect on as you think about this list. I like to think of values as that invisible mortar that holds you together. I like to think of values as springboards for daily action. I like to think of values as what are the things that define who we are at our best, that we can do more of what we do best. One of my favorite pictures of values is that a river without banks is just a large puddle. So what are the banks that we're going to put into place as a congregation that we say, no, these are our die fors. These are the things that we're not going to move forward unless these are in place. And as we limit and focus ourselves around these boundaries, they create momentum. They create energy. They do something in us together. Now, as I said, I'll put together some things that I want you to be thinking about. Just a few thoughts. I want you to think about what each of these means to you personally. I want you to look at your ministries and think about how are these values, how have they always been reflected in the ministry that you do? And obviously, how could they be strengthened in the ministry that you do? What are some things in your ministries that show off these, or that are misaligned, that are maybe pulling against these ideas? And those are, again, really, really big questions. So our starting point, though, is just to say, okay, what does this mean to you? One big question that I would like you to do and have with your teams is there something missing? Is there something you feel would be a top 4 that's not captured by these? And if so, what would that be? And we want to give that input back to the Joel team, and we want to sit together with leaders in our September leadership gathering and have that same conversation with a broader group of leaders. Another thing I want you to be thinking about here is, which one of these do you think is most realized at Christ Church today? Which is held the most broadly and most deeply in the church? Which one do you think is most aspirational? Which one are we most liable to talking about but not really having deep in our bones, so to speak? So those are just some of the ideas that I want to encourage you to have some conversation with, both as a larger staff and then more specifically in your departments together. Now, the biggest thing that I'm going to ask you to do is I do want you to, in your departments, make a bullet point list of 3 to 5 bullet points for each one of these values, where you articulate how you are demonstrating this value today in these ministry environments. And as a team, I want you just to create and come up with some ways of articulating what's there already. How is this already being demonstrated in your ministry area? So, hey, it's great to be with you guys here via video. I look forward to seeing you soon. Have fun talking about values.